Well, Andy, I was thinking of this conversation this morning, and I was thinking, I think it could be a lot like fishing, meaning that I think it could be the kind of situation where you and I are out there and we know there are fish in those waters, and our conversation is just going to catch a few of them. So that relaxes things for me. I hope it does for you.
Let's go fishing.
All right. Good. You know, as I was thinking about this, it'll be 50 years in September that you began working here, 50 years ago, long time. It was 4 years after the declaration of the first Earth Day. And so it was kind of a very significant time. And you were hired right out of graduate school in the fall of 1974 to be the chief naturalist here at Fontenelle Forest. Can you tell us what the forest was like then, and what the job was, and how you fit into that job, how you made that job your own?
These are really interesting questions. It was my first job, and I basically knew what a naturalist was. I'm not sure that I really knew what a naturalist did, but I was really grateful to have a position that had something to do, with biology. And there were some sketchy guidelines for what I needed to do. I remember the first day on the job walking into the nature center, and Patty Nysonder was the administrative assistant, and she said, "Oh, good morning. You're the new naturalist. By the way, you are the publicist." and and I said, "What is a publicist?" "Oh," she said, "you write the news releases." Well, I'm not sure that I was familiar with the news release then, but by the time I left, I think I had crafted 1,200. But what I discovered was that the public, because of Earth Day and so forth, had an environmental conscience that was awakening. And there was this appetite for nature, for anything to do with nature, and maybe, the realization that we needed to lessen our impact on the planet, that a lot of things weren't working very right. And I understood that. But my real interest, because of my background in 11 years of university training, 7 years of graduate training, made me see the possibilities of interpreting the plants and animals in the forest, of actually making them known to the public there in Omaha. And I had a background, I think, suitable for at least starting that. And then I learned as I proceeded too. But I was just overjoyed that there was so much interest in this, and that there were friendly ears, that there were people in the community who wanted to know more about bur oaks and the other trees in the forest, and the jack and the pulpit, so forth, all of the different components there. And do understand that although I grew up in the Midwest, it was quite an awakening for me too, to discover all the wonderful plants and animals in Fontenelle Forest. And so it was a mutual learning situation, I think. But they were the provided the material that I needed for these programs.
Great. It was an opportunity for you, and an opportunity for the visitors, the people who came to the forest as well. I can hear that in what you're talking about.
It really was. It was indeed. And I was just astonished at how many people in the community were interested in Fontenelle Forest and interested in the programs.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You created lots of programs while you were here during that time. You published articles for the Omaha World Herald, a lot of those we know. And you were a good friend of the outdoor columnist Fred Thomas. He wrote columns for the World Herald for years. You were also illustrating our newsletter at the time, and you were connecting with lots of people. Tell us about the response you got from the people at that time. You've alluded to it, but could you tell us more about that?
Well, a little difficult to articulate. There was a lot of emotion, just a lot of feelings, a lot of positive feedback. There was no doubt that the people participating in the programs appreciated the information that was coming across to them. I would say they had an insatiable appetite for that. And what that meant was it gave me the encouragement then to sort of reach beyond, to think of related topics, other ways of working different plants and animals into the programs.
I know when you were here, I attended 2 programs that you led. One was the infamous turkey trot after Thanksgiving, and the other was the program Birds and Bagels on Sunday morning. And I think you had good turnouts for the Birds and Bagels. I think that was on a regular basis, but it was just a nice, casual kind of thing.
That's a nice way to put it. I think that the approach for many of the programs that I conducted, interpretive walks and even lectures, could be framed in pretty much in that same manner. The interpretation is a process, of course, really a series of educational processes that reveal meanings and relationships through firsthand experience, and then sometimes through original objects or maybe illustrative materials like lectures and videos and so forth. But it's very serious, but it's also educating entertainingly. And I think the audiences, the people who participated in my programs, understood that and appreciated it. And the sign that they did was that they came back. You always had that feeling, well, what if nobody comes, for my next walk or whatever? But that was never a problem. You mentioned Fred Thomas. He was extraordinary. He was just a wonderful journalist who really appreciated Fontenelle Forest and the programs, that I offered. And he would come down during the week before a program and sit down in my office and ask me some questions about, well, what's the program going to be like? What will you be doing? And then he would go back and publish these articles in the paper. And that really helped to establish the rapport, I think, with the public and to increase attendance and so forth, magnify the impact of what I was doing.
That's very interesting. You did just an excellent description of what interpretation is, because that was going to be my next question. What do you see as the challenges for interpretation these days?
I don't know that they have changed a lot. One of the major ones is that we are losing our naturalists. You folks there are extraordinary, really. But I think that on the whole, biology has turned to producing specialists, whether they're herpetologists or wildlife biologists or conservation biologists, entomologists, and so forth. But we're losing our generalists, which makes it very difficult to recruit people into these opportunities to engage the public with local natural history. And I think that's a critical process because it's through personal experiences, encounters with the plants and animals around us that we begin to understand their importance and how they belong to a system, to a natural community. And then that leads to even larger systems, and we're a part of those systems. Our well-being hinges on them. Our physical, our mental, all of these, we depend on this. And I think that we have a pressing need today, a growing need to make a greater effort to bring this material, the plants and animals, the natural history around us in local communities, to the people living there.
In a broader sense, rather than just the specific kind of things, the specific kinds of species or specific kinds of situations, to speak of how those are connected to the broader world.
Yes, indeed, and that's well put. When you interpret successfully, when you're an interpretive naturalist and you interpret successfully, you do that. That's the revealing the meanings and the relationships. It's not just the fact that the cardinal belongs here in this particular deciduous community. It's what does it mean beyond that? How is it connected to other parts of the ecosystem and, in fact, the planet, the global processes that we have?
It strikes me, and I think that was one of the original things that caught my interest about your time here. Your illustrations, you illustrated almost every newsletter, the cover of every newsletter, that was published while you were here, your current interest in photography, and your passion for fishing. They imply an interest in observing the natural world, but also being involved directly in it. Can you tell us what these mean, why these mean so much to you?
Difficult to do, but I'll try. I think I have pointed out to some friends that I was born in Kansas City and lived there until I was 5 years old. Quite ill at that time. My parents' dream was to move to a farm. They bought a small farm southeast of Kansas City near Raymore, Missouri. And at the age of about 7 or 8 years old, I went outside. I wasn't ill anymore. And I said, I'm not going back indoors. And that early experience, grew, multiplied, and gave me a lot of firsthand encounters with all of the plants and animals, and an appreciation for their complexity, their beauty, and so forth, which then eventually found its way into things like photography and art. But I saw these as important vehicles for sharing my enjoyment, my understanding, sharing the importance of these things, my love of these things with audiences around me. And I think it's a little bit, when we see a beautiful sunset, we see a beautiful flower, a beautiful bird. I think it's human nature to want to share that with someone, to tell them about it. And, that kind of explains a lot of the attitude that I had, when I was there at the forest. It was an easy process, a very easy situation for me to look around and see all of these things and say, boy, I'm sure other people would enjoy them, and then helping them discover them. And I did this through, the interpretive walks and the lectures, and I was helped by other people as well, for sure. But it was a means of, translating that information, and photography was a key part of that. Photography and the interest in my illustrating as well. And these fit right into the interpretive process.
What has nature and your involvement in nature and being with it and observing it, what has it taught you over all of these years?
I think that it is. I think one of the key things it has taught me is observation, the importance of observation. We see things, with our eyes, but we really observe with our minds, and nature teaches us to observe. And then a part of this becomes recording what we see, recording the observations, nature journaling, for example. And if you go back through the history of science, you'll discover that Charles Darwin, Aldo Leopold, their contributions, their careers were fueled by nature journaling. And this observation leads to questions, and we start asking the questions. And I think it is our tendency, innate nature, to try to answer those questions. And this leads to better better stewardship of our natural communities. And the understanding of then, we have an even greater task before us because of things such as climate change. So that's and then nature has also taught me perseverance, patience, and it's given me a lifetime of joy, of satisfaction. It never ends. It's unending. It's bottomless. And so are the questions. So are the questions, by the way. One question begets another question. So that's sort of my take on nature and what I have derived from it. And it also explains why I like to do the programs at Fontenelle Forest, and discovered that there were other individuals, lots of individuals who had that same interest and appreciated things.
You say that so well, Andy. Yesterday, I was sitting in this very room just thinking about some of the questions I was going to ask you. And I looked out behind me, or in front of me at the time, and there was a white-breasted nuthatch crawling up the tree. And I thought to myself, that's why I like doing these things. That's why I like being out in the natural world, because I know I observe that animal, that bird in this case, and I know that we share this world together. And that means something different. I then want to protect things so that that bird can have a life as well. And so I think what you're saying is right. The observation comes first. And then I'm pleased with what you say about how your mind deals with that information. And it's a valuable, it's meant a great deal to me over the years, that observation, but that being present in the natural world as well.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, you subtract those elements and you think about how miserable life can become when you don't
Yes.
have the patch, when you don't have the gray fox, when you don't have the bull snake. Oh my, what a dull, dull environment it becomes. And not only that, its disappearance threatens our existence. And sometimes we just don't have the background to understand that, to really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Is there something else you would like to add in our conversation today?
Again, my enjoyment of all the people that I got to work with in so many different capacities. And I chuckle because I think about how, some of the programs came about. I remember reading a biography of Roger Tory Peterson and thinking, I should offer a bird study course for the people here in this community. And so I put one together, a 9-month program, monthly program. And what that was so satisfying. It just really was. And people apparently enjoyed it because they kept coming back to it. And one night I said to them, you can't come back anymore. I need the spaces for some new folks who would like to learn about birds. But I'll tell you what, next year I'm going to offer a different program for you, Mother Nature's Calendar of Natural Events.
Oh, yes.
And most of those people, it was a 9-month course again, but most of the people came back to that. But that course was based upon a really critical realization of mine, and that was the necessity of creating meticulous notes on what was happening in Fontenelle Forest, the natural world. The journaling, that I had been doing intensified, and what rewards that offered me. My gosh, the benefits were enormous because it enabled me to better plan programs, to expand programs, to include things that perhaps had not been a part of the repertoire in the past. Along the same line, I can remember I hadn't been in Fontenelle Forest that long before I noticed all the butterflies. I had been a butterfly fanatic since I was a kid. And I thought, my word, all these wonderful butterflies, we need to have some butterfly programs. And so, I started those, and eventually we had the first butterfly count there in eastern Nebraska. But it was the journaling, the note-taking that led to this awareness, this sensitivity, and to the ideas that I had. And sometimes they were critically important too, because it was really wonderful to be able to offer chartered bus trips to to people there in the community, to see the snow geese up at DeSoto or down at Lusk Mountains, or to go out to Grand Island and see the sandhill cranes. And at that time, there wasn't that much awareness about these resources. That has changed, but at that time there wasn't. Well, if you're going to plan programs like that, you need to know something about the weather. And weather was a part of the note taking. And I realized if you want to have a chartered bus trip for people to see the sandhill cranes, you want to go on the third weekend in Nebraska. You don't want to go on the second weekend because that's when the blizzards occur. But one kind of note taking led to another, and so that allowed me to expand and amplify a lot of the programs. And then also there were the programs for the young people. And I am very proud of the roster of programs, but again, it was a joint effort on the part of many people. But we offered programs. Well, here in the profession, we joke a little bit about the ankle biters and the curtain climbers and the rug rats, but we had programs for the very young preschool kids right up to what we called, and I'm one of them now, the gray hairs. But it was nice to reach all of these different audiences, and then to sit back and look and say, who are we missing? Who have we left out? Maybe we need a program for scout groups. Maybe we need programs for teachers. And so I think an important part of the interpretive process is recognizing all the potential audiences that are available in your community. And I think some nature centers overlook this, responsibility or opportunity. So that, that was a part of it. And then another thing happened to me too. And I thought, well, yes, it's nice to have an interpretive walk that's built around a jack in the pulpit, for example. And it's easy to build an entire walk around one species of plant and then use that plant to reach out to all the other things around, for example, in Fontenelle Forest and their importance, how they belong. But it was I think the awareness that came to me was, okay, you deliver this information through an interpretive walk, but what about an article in the newspaper? Or what about an appearance on TV? Or what about, a radio program? And so there were opportunities to use different media to educate the public about what we were doing there in Fontenelle Forest. And I think that's, important.
I would agree with you. As you talk about those, I'm thinking, Fontenelle Forest is proud to continue that tradition of educating and engaging the public, as you did when you were here. And we continue to have that as a high priority. Tonight, though, or at least the night when we're celebrating this, the newest phase of education might be the recognition of our online digital program called Nature Search.
Yes.
Which was created by some of your good friends, Phil Swanson, Neil Radsliff, and some others. And so I would ask you, what other suggestions would you have? Do you have any thoughts or ideas about new possibilities for the future or reaching out? How do we incorporate this whole world of technology in all of this?
That's an important question, and I'm maybe not the best person to answer that. I think a lot about social media and cyberspace and so forth. I've joked with people about what would have happened to me as an interpretive naturalist if all my hike participants were carrying a cell phone and had Merlin as an app. It might have been pure chaos. I think they would have fired me right on the spot. But I think there's a lot of potential. I hesitate a little bit. I don't want to be too critical, but people enjoy people enjoy being out with others. And I think there's a tendency to rely too much on the social media and web pages and so forth, because if you don't know about a gray fox, you're probably not going to go online and look up anything about a gray fox. And yet maybe you have a gray fox in your front yard. And so when you're around interpretive naturalists, as you have there, these people, have a sensitivity and understanding about these, then that connection is made. Then the spark is lit. I'm not sure how much we can do online with this. And I've seen a tendency for a lot of centers, to put a lot of emphasis on it. And I guess I'm skeptical that it really works. When I think of interpretation, I do think of all the different kinds of programs that you can do based on the natural community that you're in. And this is sometimes, I think, overlooked. We do environmental education, but we do it at the expense of the specific plants and animals around us that people really enjoy. And then I think we need to think about the audiences we have and not leave anybody out. Not easy, because few centers have all the funds that they need to do this, but we need to recognize the potential to reach all of these different audiences and do our very utmost to do that. And then we need to think about the vehicles. And web pages can be one of those. I think that in-person encounters interpretation is probably the most powerful means, but we do have the media, for example, the print media that we can work with. We've got the electronic media. We've got a lot of other venues that can be used. Even things such as artwork, art fairs and so forth. Concentrating on natural subjects. These work as well, of course. But that's sort of how I view this. It's sort of a three-pronged model for effective interpretation. And yes, the electronic media is one, but I do think that sometimes it's perhaps it has its drawbacks and maybe is overutilized.
I couldn't agree with you more. I use Audubon's bird identification, but it's only a backup. It's only a
Yeah.
backup when I'm not sure. And actually, I'd rather be more engaged with observing what color the bird is and that sort of thing, and its identifying characteristics, than IDing it, naming it. But eventually you get to that. And so I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to wind this down here, and I'm going to conclude here. Then we can chat just for
Yes.
fun. On behalf of Fontenelle Forest in 2024, we want to thank you so much for your presence here so many years ago. I think Bridget has been very clear about that. We are also very grateful for your engaging with us today and in the past several months. It's been a delight. And we wish you all the very best, and especially good fishing in the days to come. And I want you to know that Tyler said to me this morning, tell him to enjoy tight lines.
Spoken like
That
another.
means a fish on the hook, right?
Absolutely. And that means that he really understands the process. That's our typical greeting. But I too want to thank you again for this. I really appreciate it, and to emphasize that it was a part of a team effort. And I did not at the beginning identify some of the people on the nature search team, such as the Paddlefords and Eric and
Right.
Phil and Neil. They were all critical people, and it's easy to overlook how much they meant to the programs that we developed there at Fontenelle Forest. They played critical roles in bringing other people into the family, to making them a part of the Fontenelle Forest group. And again, my thanks to the teacher naturalists, the trail guides, the Forest Guild at that time, the board members. They were all a part of the formula. And my role was fairly small. It was one that I really enjoyed, and it worked pretty well because of the help of all these other groups and individuals.
Well, thank you. I think that was a gem right there. Well,